What happened that actually led you to the alternative approach to recovery?
It was that suicidal moment. I was at a place where I was again contemplating suicide for what was the fourth time in my life. The very first time that I attempted suicide, I was probably about 6 or 7 years old. And at that time,
6 years old?
Yeah, at that time, because of the what was going on in our home, it was very, very chaotic, very tumultuous household.
Not
and
loving
it just
and supportive or comforting.
Absolutely, it just felt like it would be easier had I never been born.
Almost like you were the problem.
Absolutely, and I couldn't fix it. And and ultimately a healer. And at that very innocent age, I couldn't fix or I couldn't help anything. So I really felt like if I wasn't alive or my parents wouldn't be having the problems they were having. I took it on and I was blaming myself for it. So I did. I climbed up into the medicine cabinet. I remember it so clearly, taking a handful of aspirin, and having ingested it, and then going into almost like panic and prayer and saying, "No, God, please, no, don't, I don't want to die after. I don't want this." And I had a very good sleep, truly. But I was
Missed the school bus.
Exactly, right. But I did, that was the first time. And here I was again for the fourth time in my life contemplating suicide. But this time I had 3 little babies, and at the core, I didn't want to leave them a legacy of a mother who wasn't strong enough to be able to continue to show up for them.
Did you have a postpartum at all?
I did have postpartum, and that actually came about after the birth of my first child. It was really on the tail end of the death of my dad. So my son was born 2 months after my dad had been killed. I was grieving, and all of a sudden I'm put into the position of being a new mom and the joy that comes along with that. And really moved, hormonally, everything. It's a natural thing to take place for women. And I remember one time being in a real emotional state, and my mom just said, "Bonnie, you need to stop that right now. You're not going to be one of those women." And so I did. What I had done best was to ignore my feelings and to pretend that it wasn't affecting me, because it was, I wasn't going to allow myself to go there. But I had been depressed for many years. Postpartum depression, I think, carried through.
Made it even worse.
Exactly. It was compounding, really,
Little
to the
T
wounds.
went to big T.
Absolutely, that I had carried earlier. So I had reached up this point of crisis, and that was really what was the pivotal time, is I knew I needed help. But forgiveness is the gift that we give to ourselves. And my approach on forgiveness, and in working with my clients as well, is to look at the many ways to forgive ourselves. We hear all the time that forgiveness is about us, and it truly is. The very basic principle is not about this spiritual act where we feel pushed or this need to forgive other people, but to forgive ourselves. And through my forgiveness work that I've done, I've forgiven myself for being naive. I gave myself for not speaking up at times when I needed to speak up. I also needed to forgive myself for the times that I did speak up and maybe, or I didn't accept the help from the doctor that very day, right? I had to look at all of these ways. I had to really move through and take a look at the role that I played in my own life. And I had to forgive myself for believing I wasn't worthy of anything more. Everything that I've done in moving through this forgiveness process, or we could say is forgiving other people, have forgiven myself. And what I've discovered is, as we forgive our own self, the need to forgive anyone for anything completely disappears. I don't believe that, God, the universe, whatever word you want to put on it, made a mistake that the day any of us were born. There is a very unique and specific recipe for each of us. And so being able to fully accept and understand, who we are in the world as unique and as individuals is a very powerful thing. We have power of choice, and if we're not choosing this as our direction and path, it won't be of any benefit for someone. So it's when someone is ready to take this approach that becomes most beneficial for them. So I really honor people where they are and what would be their resistance. A lot of that has to do in terms of their conditioning or their beliefs, and I don't go out of my way to change anyone's mind. This is something that's very personal for us as individuals, but it is, even the hesitancy of it, I always invite people to come back to saying, well, but what's the possibility of it? Self-responsibility, that's the key, I think, with all of it. You know, it becomes being able to do the work. No one can do the work for us.
Right.
We can all hold space for each other, and I can help someone when they're willing to help and they're doing that work on their own, because that's a part of the journey itself. That's a part of the process. If we're not applying what we're hearing, or applying where our invitations are being offered, nothing's going to change.
Right.
And so in the willingness, the open mind, the willingness to move forward with doing it and take action. You know, it's like, I always use the analogy of someone who is unhappy in their job, and they talk about how unhappy they are in their job and how they wish they had another job, and they go on and on and on and complain, and they're caught up in that perpetual cycle of this terrible job that they have. But in the meantime, they're not looking or sending out the resume for any other job, right? So without action, nothing happens. They're worthy of happiness. They're worthy of being loved. They're worthy of being respected. They're worthy of more in their life. And that, you know, who they are does make a difference in the life, in everyone's life, whether they recognize that or not. And most importantly, I just keeps coming back to them just knowing that there's something more available for them. It's possible. If it was possible for me, it's possible for them too.